Facepalm America, I'm Beowulf Rockland. FacepalmAmerica.com is, as always, the place where you can go to get more information about this show, to listen to past episodes, and to connect with us on social media. If you've ever listened to a speech by Donald Trump, especially when he's not reading from the teleprompter, you know how bizarre it is, how odd, and what a interesting, that's the word, insight it gives us into the workings of his mind. But it does have one advantage that perhaps Democrats and others could learn from if they want to recreate a certain amount of the energy that Donald Trump has created on his side of the political spectrum, and that is improvisation. It's very much off the top of his head. It's very much off the cuff. And that is a quality which our guest today believes is lacking in American politics. Randy Fertel is the author of Winging It, Improv's Power and Peril in the Time of Trump. Randy Fertel, welcome to Facepalm America. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So when you listen to a speech by Donald Trump, what do you hear in his cadence and delivery?
What I hear is the dark side of something I've been studying my whole life. I stumbled on this theme when I was in my 20s, studying in Paris. I was reading Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus, and there was this tension in that book between the prepared, the composed, and the breakthrough into spontaneous music. It's about a composer, Adrian Leverkühn. And I hadn't quite figured it out yet, but I kept thinking about it. And then I started seeing these I was in graduate school in English, and I kept seeing these things like Tristram Shandy and that were impromptu, that urged that they were doing it off the cuff, that, I didn't know what my pen would do next. And
if you've never read Tristram Shandy, it's a very stream of consciousness work.
Yeah, big influence on Joyce and other stream of consciousness thing. Anyway, so I thought about it. What is it that connects these texts that seem to somehow be in the same family? And I decided it's that trope. It's that I'm doing this off the cuff.
Right.
This is totally new, something new under the sun. And, every one of those 30,000 lies that Donald Trump told during his presidency was something new under the sun. It wasn't based on evidence, something, factual from that you can put your finger on in the past. It was created in the moment. It was something totally new. And I'd always known that there was a dark side to improv. The Romantics were big on spontaneity, the powerful overflow of feelings in Wordsworth. But in Kubla Khan, Coleridge's great paean to the spontaneous imagination, at the end of it, he says, "Weave a circle round him thrice, for he on honeydew hath fed and drunk the milk of paradise. Beware, beware." So I knew there was a dark side, and the great improvisers talk about that, because when you're committed to inspiration, you have to worry about who's doing the inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, because you could look at FDR.
Eve gets inspired by a snake whispering in her ear.
Right.
That's a problem.
Right.
So I knew there was a dark side, and improvisers. I call my first book on improv "Taste for Chaos," because I said that improvisers have a taste for it, but they don't go whole hog. They don't eat the whole hog.
Right.
So I knew there was this dark side, but when Trump came down that golden escalator and I heard that first rant, I thought, man, I didn't know how dark it could get. And I started watching MSNBC religiously. It was rather painful and troubling to get as much detail as I could get. And people started remarking, again and again, people remarked about his improvisation, but the power of his improvising was dismissed. It was just called unpresidential.
Right.
They didn't see it as a rhetorical gesture that had persuasive power. And it does, because when I say I'm doing this off the cuff, I'm not doing it based on models. What I'm saying is, listen, trust me.
Yeah.
I've given this no thought, so trust me. Now, that's not a very logical proposition, but it has great power, and it has had that power throughout history. And that's largely because the neuroscientists now tell us that we have one brain but two minds. We have two different ways of attending to the world. We have hot cognition and we have cold cognition. Cold cognition is that more logical, rational, step-by-step, wise approach to life. Hot cognition is in the moment. It's worried about, is there a tiger coming through that cane break?
Right.
Cold cognition says, well, it wasn't there yesterday. It's the predictive function. So it just says, well, can't be a tiger. There are no tigers around here. So, that guy contributes to the gene pool by removing himself from it. But cold cognition says, I think we better run. And actually, it starts running even before it thinks, let's run. And that's what neuroscientists have shown. So there's great power in this in the moment behavior. And comic improvisers develop this skill in doing that. Trump also has a skill, and it's the skill that improvisers have. He's a good listener. Now, he's not a good listener to you or me or to individuals or to the grown-ups in the room.
He's a good listener to crowds, certainly.
He's a good listener to crowds. And it's a documented fact that the build the wall idea came from a mnemonic that his handlers gave him before a speech. They said they wanted him to talk about immigration problem. Mm-hmm. So they put a little icon of a wall. Well, he reified it. He said, right, we're going to build a wall and they're going to pay for it. Mm-hmm. Next thing you know, the explosive response of the crowd made this the major plank in his platform and then a major policy. So he is, people push back and say he hasn't done the work that jazz musicians do or that comic improvisers do. You can't call him an improviser. And it is uncomfortable to put him in the ranks of Robin Williams and the like. Right. But he is an improviser. And he's been practicing his lies for decades.
When I hear a speech by Donald Trump, it comes across to me. It may not be true. It may not bear any relation to the facts, but it comes across as genuine and real in the moment. Because I believe that's because it's coming from that part of his brain. He's not filtering it through a structured mode of speech, and that's why it's so right, wandering, and that thoroughly has the potential, and I believe it actually does end up being evil in a fundamental way. However, it's genuine from him, and I believe that a lot of people have in the last couple of generations seen politicians, Republicans and Democrats use that filter so much that they associate that with the political problems that they have and the issues and the difficulties in their lives because they don't get any response when they try to change those things. They get that same sort of filtered thing. That is not what they get from Donald Trump. And so
Right.
I think they associate that lack of filtration, that improvisation, with something that is going to help them ultimately. What do you think about that?
And well, you're exactly right, because the filtration is what improv claims not to do, not to be. It's not filtered. It's not the filtration of the coastal elites.
Right.
It's not the filtration of woke culture, of cancel culture. Well, no, it is cancel culture. It's not. It's not the. It's not woke culture. It's not political correctness.
Right.
That filter. And another thing he has in common with improvisers, as I said, improvisers create community.
Right.
The odd thing about or the paradox of the comic improviser is that you can't do that without bravado. You've got to be in this charismatic flow state, which seems to be about big ego. But it's actually, because it's based on yes and the principle of agreement, you're building community within the group that you're working with, and with the audience, because the audience is following this flow and they get into a flow state. Hamilton, people love the play Hamilton because it gets the audience into a flow state that they just love.
Right.
So Trump does the same thing, but his community, it doesn't broaden. It's already there.
Right.
And they feel that they've built this community that's, self-aggrandizing, and but it doesn't build beyond itself.
Do you see anyone in the Democratic Party, or at least to the left of Trump, who publicly engages in that same way? I mean, we see a speech by Biden, and typically there's not too much improvisation in it. Although you could look to, say, last year's State of the Union address and see his responses to catcalls from the House of Representatives in the moment, and see how that was effective. Typically, however, he stays on script, and so do most, even more like engaging politicians such as, Bernie Sanders. They pretty much stick to script. They're not really off the cuff improvisers. How do you think that plays into more progressive politics, and how should it play into more progressive politics?
I referenced that State of the Union speech in my book, Winging It, because, the takeaway from this dark improvising presidency isn't to throw improvisation out the window or out with the bathwater.
Right.
It's to get back to the more positive kind of improv, and Biden's the way he set up that improvisation. Now, the one thing to note about improvisation is that the paradox is that it's hard work. That as it's been said, that spontaneity is a meticulously prepared art. And I think he and his handlers, Biden's handlers, had prepared him for that improvisation, because he knew that if he mentioned that they wanted to sunset Social Security and Medicare, that he would get hecklers, and he was prepared for the heckle. He said, "Oh, so you're not against, or you don't want to sunset, whatever that's called, Social Security. So I'll count on your vote."
Right.
He did the same thing this year. He gave them some red meat to respond to, and they responded, and they're very predictable.